Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. Joining us is Representative Ed Royce, a Republican representing the 40th District of California. He is a senior member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, the ranking member of the Terrorism, Nonproliferation and Trade Subcommittee, and a member of the Committee on Financial Services. He recently announced his candidacy for that committee's chairmanship. Welcome to Newsmax TV, sir. In the wake of the virtual acquittal of the accused African embassy bomber, do you think that Attorney General Eric Holder and President Obama will reverse their decision to try accused terrorists in civilian court versus military tribunals?
I don't know if they will, but this just shows the magnitude of the mistake that they've made, because this gives new evidence to why we were concerned, why we felt that not only holding but having those trials in Guantanamo would be the way to handle this in military tribunals, so that we did not have these types of decisions go against the interests of people here in the United States, and didn't send this type of a message abroad in terms of our own incapacity to handle terrorism. You know, this isn't a U.S. citizen. This is someone who was at war with the United States, and as such should have been handled in a military tribunal. We can hope that we can reverse this. Now,
there's been a huge public outcry over those new screening procedures at our nation's airports, yes, implemented by the TSA, including those intimate pat-downs, right, and those naked body scanners. Do you think that the Obama administration knows who the enemy is here in the war on terror, and what, if anything, can Congress do to resolve this?
Well, this of course is the great frustration, because for those of us, and I chaired international terrorism in the past, for those of us trying to explain why it was that we wanted to listen in real time to the conversations of terrorists abroad over the phone and be able to track those terrorists, you'll remember that we had a tremendous amount of difficulty with the leaks to the New York Times, tipping off the terrorists in terms of how we monitor their activities. Our goal was to try to monitor them while they were overseas, not wait until they get in the United States and then further encumber our citizens as we tried to sort them out here. Our goal was to try to basically follow them and catch them overseas. And so this is frustrating now, because we've moved to a very different modus operandi. We're now basically conceding that they're going to get past that line of defense. We have far fewer tools than we did have in terms of being able to monitor and track and apprehend without their knowledge that we were listening into their conversations, because of some of the steps that the left has taken here in the United States. So I think there are concerns about the approach we've taken.
Now, your Republican colleague from Florida, Representative John Mica, says that he thinks the TSA should be disbanded. Do you agree?
Well, he's concerned that we've basically created a huge bureaucracy here. And as you can see with the costs that Europe and the United States are dealing with right now, you see that whole programs are being cut by 25% in Britain today. Maybe 500,000 public employees in Britain are going to be downsized, moved, you know, out of the public sector and into the private sector. I think what John is thinking about is, you know, how do you move to privatize this type of a situation and not have these individuals all as public employees with all the costs that would bring and mean to the taxpayers in the United States.
Okay. To U.S. relations with Russia and concerns about the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, otherwise known as START, should the Senate ratify the START treaty during the lame duck, and what happens if it doesn't?
Well, as you know, Senator John Kyle, who is sort of our point man on this whole issue of missile defense, has some concerns. And I think it would be wise for the administration to work with him to address those specific concerns, because what we want to see is an effective missile shield. And until the administration is on board sort of guaranteeing that they're going to take the types of steps instead of undercutting our capacity for missile defense, I think there are reservations about moving forward. And so I would suggest to the administration, now is the time to sit down with Senator Kyle, come to the table and address conservatives' long-term concerns about how we're going to defend this country without effective missile defense.
With more Republicans elected to the next session of Congress, do you see the U.S. increasing its support for Israel?
Well, I do. I was in Israel during the Hezbollah war, and actually was in Haifa when that city was being shelled. And I had an opportunity to go down to the trauma hospital. There were 600 victims of that attack. I think for those of us that are watching the war on terror and seeing the consequences in human lives lost in places like Mumbai, India, and in Haifa, Israel, there is this sense that we must try to create a deterrent to this kind of terrorism.
At what point do you think should the U.S. consider the military option to address the Iranian nuclear threat? And do you think that the United States would be more supportive of a strike by Israel?
The difficulty right now for Israel is being able, I think, to determine where those underground facilities are and whether or not they can effectively remove those facilities. And that is why what we have attempted to do is to push, and of course the administration has drugged their feet on this, but push an effort to sort of collapse the current regime in Iran through sanctions which would implode those regimes. Not just tough sanctions, but sanctions which would actually lead to the implosion of the regime. What has been exempted is the pressure on China necessary because we've brought the rest of the world around to working with us on this approach. China is not, and that can undercut our ability to do what is necessary to stand with the people, the Persian people in Iran, who you saw after that election, right, as the president dithered. They went to the streets. What we needed at the time was somebody like Reagan, who would stand up and make a clarion call to the world to go to the defense of those who really won that election in Iran. That's more the approach, I think, that will be successful.
Let's talk about the Bush-era tax cuts. The GOP has been pushing for an extension of tax cuts to all wage earners. Democrats want them for folks making $250,000 annually or less. Do you see a resolution before these cuts expire at the year's end?
Well, we're in the middle of, right now, a recession. And we've got spending on growing government that's sort of choking off the recovery. In the middle of a recession, you would never want to increase taxes. So the message that we're sending as Republicans is that don't double down. You know, we've already seen these massive increases in spending under Pelosi, and with the stimulus and the rest of the money going into growing government instead of creating real jobs. Don't compound that by putting in effect a tax increase on job creators, especially now. So that's our thrust, and that's why we want to hold off and hold the line and not see those tax increases go into effect.
Now, Republicans have been particularly opposed to the new financial reform law enacted by Congress this summer. Will Republicans repeal, and how confident are you that a repeal could actually happen given President Obama's veto powers?
Well, first let me explain issues like what Chris Dodd and Barney Frank created there that give us concern. We have a new bureaucracy that's been put in place in which the safety and soundness regulators are not going to have final say. You've got political activists basically right now, academics, that are going to set up new rules. We want this changed so that the prudential regulators, the safety and soundness regulators, can regulate for safety and soundness. That should be the first principle, all right? Second, we also have concerns about this whole too big to fail concept. That needs to be addressed. We don't want another Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. We don't want a GSE, government-sponsored enterprise situation, where the government is perceived to be behind the very large institutions while the too small to save institutions that compete with them have a higher cost of capital as a consequence of that advantage. So these are issues that we need to go back and address. This is legislation that needs to pass. Yeah.
How do we begin to restructure the housing finance system?
This was one of the arguments that I originally made in 2004 and 2005 when I was debating Barney Frank. The idea of going forward and having the federal government put these mandates on Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to go into subprime and Alt-A and to build up their portfolios. The observation we made at the time was that if this all collapsed, private capital would rush out of the market. Indeed, it was driven out of the market by the monopoly of Fannie and Freddie. So now we're in this tough position of bringing private capital back into the market at a time when everyone's fearful. That's why what we need to do at this point is first end the process of private gains and public taxpayer losses that is part of Fannie and Freddie. And second, work for a phase out of Fannie and Freddie as we phase in and entice in private capital. This is going to take a while because it took a while to destroy the market, but that's what the government intervention under the 92 GSE Act put in place, was the lack of the ability to regulate against this. So these are the issues that we're going to address going forward in order to reverse and move out of the current system and bring down those portfolios over time and bring in private capital.
Representative Royce, last question real quickly. The Wall Street Journal and former Governor Sarah Palin are supporting you in your push to be chairman of the Financial Services Committee. She recently said that she could beat President Obama in 2012. Do you think that she could? And who would you like to see for the Republicans?
Well, I think any of our Republican nominees right now would be likely to defeat President Obama. What I want to see out of our nominees for that contest for president is to see who best presents to the American public the argument for moving to a culture of independence as Americans and away from this idea of a culture of dependence, which is what the left is pushing in the United States. This is going to be a battle of ideas, and what we're going to have a chance to see is who can best articulate those ideas, because at the end of the day, it's the ideas that are most important. So it's off to the races, and we'll see which of the Republican candidates can best explain our theories and rally the American public behind them.
Representative Royce, thanks so much.
Thank you.
If folks want to learn more about you, where can they go?
Well, you know, I would just suggest just follow the media, follow Newsmax, follow what you're doing. If people will stay attuned to these issues and will tune in to the types of shows and programs which really offer insight on these public policy issues and get into depth a little bit. That's what I want to see people doing. You know, rather than reference them to a specific organization or website, I just think people need to be engaged right now. And the other thing I'm going to suggest to people, you know, I hold a lot of town hall meetings, a lot of, you know, open forums, and so do other members of the House. People should get involved in these, in their own districts, and they should have their views heard. They should go down there, speak out, tell their representatives what they're feeling and thinking right now.
All right, Representative Royce, thank you.
Appreciate it.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.